Hi everyone, welcome to Lesson 4 in the Legislative Branch. This last lesson will focus on the powers of the legislative branch. Your objectives are to identify what the principal powers are of Congress and the reasoning behind them. Why did the framers choose for Congress to have these powers? Secondly, you should be able to, as part of the continuing research into the branches of government, be able to analyze a system of checks and balances between the three branches, especially in relation to the legislative branch and its checks on the executive and the judicial branches. Now, before we talk about any of the powers, the primary power of Congress we already talked about, and that was the power to make laws. If you're not sure about that, rewatch Lesson 3. But what other powers does the Congress have? Well, Congress has the power to declare war. The founders were very worried and apprehensive about an all-powerful central government figure and wanted to put extraordinary limitations on the power of the president, the chief executive, especially within their capacity of being commander-in-chief of the military. The president controls the military in times of peace and war. That's a big power. If you control the military, you can control a lot of things. So in order to limit that power, the president cannot use the military and engage in a foreign entanglement unless the Congress gives the president the power to do so by declaring war. So Congress needs to meet in a joint session. Both the House and the Senate vote together. And if the people, the representatives of the people, choose that we should go to war, and war is a big deal. When you have war, your government is saying to you, we are going to be sending our citizens to fight and die in the name of our country, to go and kill people, to maybe be sent overseas, thousands of miles away for long periods of time. War pays a heavy price to the citizenry. So we want to make sure that this isn't just a light decision that's made. That is something that is debated, that's argued, and that there's a consensus of all 535 members of the Congress before we give the president the power to do so. Now, usually the president will deliver a war address asking Congress to vote on this. For example, if you think of after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we weren't officially at war with the Japanese until December 8th, the following day, when Congress voted to give the president the power and to execute a war and to declare war on the Empire of Japan. Technically, even though we were attacked and we had thousands of Americans dead, war wasn't official, and the president couldn't officially act to build an army to respond to the Japanese until he was given the power to do so by Congress. So Congress has the power to declare war. Congress also has the power to end war. The president has the power to carry out war, to negotiate treaties. Treaties, remember, are agreements between different countries. There could be trade treaties, but also treaties also could be what are used between two countries who are at war with one another to officially end it. So wars are started by Congress, and wars are officially ended by Congress. Congress has the power to approve treaties of the president. If the Senate disagrees with the president's treaty, they could reject it, vote it down, and it becomes null and void. That means their agreement to end the war could become null and void, the trade agreement, so on and so forth. So Congress has the power to declare war and has oversight on treaties and allows them to either vote them up or down. Next, Congress has the power to levy taxes. You might remember when we talked about the American Revolution, taxation without representation was the big issue that our founders were concerned about when they went to war with Great Britain. They wanted to make sure that there was representation within our tax system. So we elect the members of Congress. Congress then has the power to levy taxes on us, to force us to pay money to the government on what we buy, on what we purchase, and then on our incomes. Um, Congress has control over what is taxed, how much we're taxed, and how that money is spent. That word is appropriate. To appropriate tax money means, all right, we're sending this many billions of dollars to military spending, this many billions to education. So, a lot of ways it's often said that Congress holds the purse strings. Congress controls our budget. They vote for our budget. They set the national budget. They control how our money is spent and how much money our government gets in. They also have the power to borrow money. They have the power to accrue a national debt, to raise the debt ceiling of how much we can borrow. So they not only own our bank, they own our credit cards. So Congress has a lot of power when it comes to the finances of the United States. Now, ultimately, it's the president who spends the money as the enforcer of the law, but they set forth how much money the president has and our government has to spend within our tax system. So, the power to take your money through taxes is another immense power that we give the Congress through the Constitution. Now, there's many other powers, the power to coin money, so on and so forth, but one of the big and more controversial powers given to the Congress, to the legislative branch, through Article 1 of the Constitution is the Elastic Clause. Basically, this says that Congress can stretch its powers as the nation as the nation changes and grows to deal with the changing needs of what the country has at that given time. Now, there's a lot of debate between liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, between how much power Congress has to stretch itself beyond just what's limited to it within the Constitution. So a lot of the debates that we've had throughout our history, if you look early on, whether or not Congress had the power to create a national bank. Debates that we see today are how much of a role should the government have in health care? Should we have a Department of Education? None of these things are defined in the Constitution, but yet our government has passed laws to regulate healthcare, education, the environment, and there's a lot of debate over within the idea of limited government over how much Congress can stretch its powers. Some argue that it shouldn't be able to stretch it into things that aren't defined by the Constitution. Others argue that since it's a living document, that we can stretch it to what our needs are in 2015 or in any year, because life changes. We're not stuck forever in 1788 and 89. Next, other powers. They have the power to coin money, establish postal systems, standards, weights, and measures. They regulate the Constitution. That means that they have the power to amend the Constitution, to add to or change to the Constitution. And they have the power to create new government agencies and committees and so on and so forth. So, for example, after 9/11, after the attacks, there's a lot of call that we need to do more within our government agencies to correlate defenses against future terrorist attacks. Congress passed laws that created a whole new government department, the Department of Homeland Security, and many different agencies within it. So Congress has the power to create new parts of the executive branch. If you look, when George Washington was president, the cabinet had 4 offices. Today it has over 15, and really could argue even beyond that, because many different levels are almost different jobs within the executive branch are cabinet level. All those positions were created by the Congress. Let's talk checks and balances. What other powers does the legislative branch have on the executive and on the judicial? First off, to make sure that our president, who is the single most powerful person in our government, doesn't abuse their power, Congress has the power of impeachment. If the president is impeached, what that means is that the House of Representatives indicts the president for committing high crimes and misdemeanors, and then the U.S. Senate puts them on trial. If the majority of a 2/3 majority in the Senate find the president to have committed these crimes and find him guilty, they can be removed from office. That's an immense power on the president. So Congress can override a presidential election and remove a president from office. Now, we've had 2 presidents in our history impeached. That means that they were put on trial in the Senate, but we've never had a president removed through impeachment. They have the power to approve appointments. So if the president says, I want so-and-so to be my Secretary of State, they don't get that job unless the Senate approves or consents to their appointment. All major executive level positions are appointed by the president, but they don't get those jobs until the president consents to it. We'll see that that's a similar check on the judicial branch. Lastly, if the president is vetoing laws that they see as overwhelmingly good for the people, Congress can reject the rejection. They can reject a presidential veto. They can override it with a 2/3 majority vote. As described earlier, that doesn't happen often. Now, the judicial branch. What checks does the Congress have in the judicial? Well, just like the executive branch, if a member of the Supreme Court is breaking the law, they can be impeached, brought up on charges by the House of Representatives, put on trial by the Senate, and removed. Members of the U.S. Supreme Court and other federal courts are appointed by the president. The Congress, the Senate specifically, has the right to advise and consent or to reject presidential appointments to the judicial branch. So if you're going to be a justice in the U.S. Supreme Court or a judge in the federal level, the Senate, the Congress, has to approve you. You don't get that job unless the legislative branch says so. Last but not least, Congress has the power to pass amendments. Now, when we talk about the judicial branch has the power of judicial review, meaning they have the power to reject laws passed by Congress if they find them to be unconstitutional. Well, if Congress passes an amendment and adds to or changes the Constitution, then the judges have to abide by it. It's now part of the Constitution. They can't say an amendment is unconstitutional because it is part of the Constitution. Having the power to add or change the Constitution is an immense power, and it's held by the legislative branch. All right, so 2 wrap-up questions on the legislative branch. First question. Talking about that first power, we talked about the power to declare war. Why do you think that the framers gave the power to declare war only to the legislative branch and not to the president? Why would they make the legislative branch chooses whether or not we're going to commit American lives and money, blood, and treasure to war? Think on that. Write out your answer. And then your second question is just really quickly describe in your own words the checks that the legislative branch has on both the executive branch and the judicial branches. The system of checks and balances is really pivotal and important in understanding all 3 branches. So it's important that you take the time to review the ways that the legislative branch can control or limit the power of the executive and judicial branches. That concludes all of your lessons on the legislative branch. Thanks for doing such great work. Have a great day.